Hello, everybody. This is Jason Anderson, Aaron Ingram from PreVeteran. We'd like to welcome you to our webinar today for how to optimize your SkillBridge program.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. And as folks are streaming in, we're going to kind of take our time and give a few minutes for people to start showing up, because we do want to interact with you guys today and kind of answer your questions, and also I think provide some really good insights and really interesting material that you're going to want to hear.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that this is conversational. We all know how important the SkillBridge program is. We also understand that it's a new program and it's having pretty significant exponential growth. We just from PreVeteran always look at things from the individual transitioning service member to provide them very transparent information on what is good out there, what is good and can be better, because ultimately at the end of the day, me and Aaron are both veterans. We care very much about the veteran community, and we also care about how to be able to optimize our community. So that's really why we're here today.
Absolutely. And yeah, we got some folks showing up now. We got Philip in here, and it's like about 11 people on right now. So let's start kicking things off.
You got it. Okay, so we are off. So here's the agenda today, but again, it's conversational. So if you have a chat or something that you would like to bring up, please just go ahead and do it. We're very much here not to just drive the program, but just drive a conversation about this. So you could see the agenda as a quick welcome, which we're doing now. We'll give you a quick overview, PreVeteran, just so you know who you're talking to and why we're chatting about this. We'll talk about SkillBridge 101 very briefly. I know everyone on this call probably knows what it is, but some people may not. We do have a couple questions for SkillBridge managers, again, kind of getting to the point of the whole webinar, which is making sure things are effective as possible. And then we're going to show you some data that we've run across that we've been doing for the last couple of years, which might be insightful. So let's continue on. So quick overview of PreVeteran. Again, hello. Name is Jason Anderson. I'm the founder, CEO of PreVeteran. I was a 20-year Air Force Air Force person. In 2014, I retired, went into aerospace defense, and then entry-level business development position. And then after that was promoted to the head of business for Japan, Korea, Taiwan for a big $6 billion company. That's where I had a sobering reality that I was not ready for either one of those roles. So I didn't even kick off a statistic of unemployed, underemployed, undersalaried. I actually, from those measures, had done well, but did not feel like I was set up for success post-military like I could have been, which then set me on the journey to PreVeteran. So I'll hand it over to Aaron in just a moment, but I'll cover this real quick. So PreVeteran at the root, at the core, is an education and training company specifically designed for military members and military spouses. Our mission is to create more successful, happier, healthier veterans for your organization and individuals overall. We specialize in preparing the transitioning military member for private sector employment. Aaron, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your story resonates with a lot of us, Jason, where it's kind of like, hey, it looks like a success on the outside, but internally or maybe within the family, there's just more going on. There's a lot of emotions and a lot of new things that pop up once you get out of the military and you're in a new environment, things that you don't necessarily expect. So what we want to do is make that process, as streamlined as possible. And because we've put over 100 veterans through our program, because Jason worked in industry for 9 years and gathered the insights from his own journey and was able to develop those into a program, we know putting veterans through our system now that what we're doing really has an impact and works. And so now we're addressing the fact that with the SkillBridge program, we have a very great opportunity to make it even better and to bring that training that we've developed over a couple of years, bring the insights and knowledge from that to SkillBridge to make it, I think, what could be a great solution for the long term for DoD to address some of the issues and challenges of that military transition and ease that transition. So I have my own experience. I'm a 10-year Navy veteran, graduated from the Naval Academy in 2012, went on my own journey as a naval aviator, and really enjoyed my time in the service. Deciding to leave after 10 years was a bit of a challenge, and having a family with 4 kids was a big driver behind that. So for me, it was a lot of personal choices going into that process, but figuring out employment was an overwhelming and daunting piece because I had decided to totally pivot careers. And so it felt like I was going to be losing something in that process. And it brought up a lot of emotions and difficult things that I didn't necessarily expect to come up. But going through PreVeteran as a student helped me land a job while I was still on terminal leave, and even negotiate a higher salary. So I got really a lot out of the program, became a big advocate, and I'm happy to be here as director of operations now. But seeing folks every day that come in the door and they're just looking for, hey, how do I take the next step forward? How do I do this? That really just goes to show you that what we're about to share, our insights about the individual, do impact organizations, and they do impact the SkillBridge program. And we think we need to solve these problems or get ahead of them a little earlier before we historically have been, so that we can start addressing some of those issues.
Nice. Thanks for that, Aaron. So one other thing I'd like to do is, because I'm not sure if everybody knows what SkillBridge is, I wanted to spend about a minute just talking about the 101 of SkillBridge, so you can kind of walk you through the slide here. At the top part of the slide shows basically a transition timeline, and you can see the vertical red line that is symbolic of the transition, actually separating, retiring. And you can see from the SkillBridge website, the intent of the SkillBridge program is an opportunity for service members to gain valuable civilian work experience through specific industry training, apprentices, or internships during the last 180 days of service. DoD Skillbridge connects transitioning service members with industry partners in real-world job experiences. Now, the other part to that is most SkillBridges statistically are 90 to 120 days, but it is eligible if you're able to get your command to actually let you go for that period of time. The expectation, however, and we'd love to get feedback from the SkillBridge managers that are on, we've seen and heard about different statistics, but we would just say a high probability of placement upon completion of the internship, therefore making it a program that's very valuable, because obviously if folks are just going into internships and not getting full-time roles, the system isn't quite working as well as it should. So I'd like to pause there for a sec. Does anybody who's in the SkillBridge management or program management role have any comment for that? And that'll kind of lead us to our next question.
And feel free to jump into the comments section to kind of interact with us as we go through this.
As we do that, remember what we're trying to do here from an intent standpoint. Obviously, SkillBridge, great opportunity for service members and corporations. We would kind of make the argument that maybe it's not completely optimized for that, and we'll show you a little downstream from that why we say that based on our data. But we also want to get feedback from you. You folks are the ones running the programs, who are in the program. So just a couple questions here for the SkillBridge managers or someone associated in the corporate roles with that. One, how does your SkillBridge program measure success? Are there actual metrics that are passed throughout the organization up to the executive teams, up to the HR folks, the hiring managers? And then in your opinion, are there ways to improve your existing program?
And feel free to kind of respond to these as we go along. We're going to pause here for a second to let you add your thoughts, but we also know that some of the ways you may think of improving the program aren't just simple solutions. They're things that would take some major time and effort. But we would like to hear from you and hear what you're experiencing with your current SkillBridge program, or what challenges you see the organization facing trying to make the program a success. All right, so we hear from Steven, success manager via full-time conversion rates. Okay, I think I could use a little bit of expanding on that, but I think what Steven is getting to is how many full-time employees are you converting out of the program? And I know Steven's done a great job at Verizon posting their stats on in the high 90s, I believe, of what their program's been able to accomplish. So I know they're doing really great with the full-time conversions within SkillBridge.
Hey, Stephen, I was also going to ask, is there good communication between like the SkillBridge program side and then the HR, teams to see what the retention is like once they actually get through the SkillBridge? Again, having a great conversion into full-time roles, is there data to suggest like the retention rates at the back end of that?
And there is a little bit of a time delay, so we'll wait here a sec.
Okay, there's another comment in here that's significant. So I'm going to read that real quick. This is from Courtney. Thanks, Courtney. So we're finding that only around 13% of participants result in post-program hires, which has led us to evaluate offerings and overall program improvements. A few examples include veteran participant mentorship opportunities, compensation discussions, and training opportunities. No, thank you for that. Again, we talk to a lot of people because we really want to understand the problem so that we can help the individual service member and help the corporation kind of bridge that gap. So getting information like that we really appreciate you kind of getting that out. We know there's going to be wide variance. I mean, it's a newer program based on just the past couple of years. So I think there is an expectation that there's going to be larger entities, smaller entities, and there's going to be wide variability based on that. So thanks for sharing that and adding that to the conversation. Okay, so Steve, thanks for saying we've tracked all of our stats internally. That's great. Also looking at Dave Stilley, small sample size, but I've seen fellow veterans get offers following their SkillBridge. It is okay to ask the company if their headcount position opportunity at the conclusion of SkillBridge.
You should. That should be one of, again, like the onus on the individual is there too. Today, we're here to talk about how corporations can improve the SkillBridge process, but it's also on the individual, right? That they need to vet these organizations and ask the right questions. And that work is on the individual, but they need to know and be aware of what a full-time employment role means and have that awareness. So yes, Dave, absolutely. Get the message out.
Get the message out. Okay, we'll appreciate that. What we'd like to do now, again, please interject by putting something in the chat. We'll stop right away and address it. Again, what we're trying to do is shed light on the SkillBridge program. What I'd like to do now is go to the next slide, right? So here's how PreVeteran kind of views the transition space. And maybe this is a different way that you've seen it before. So just let me walk through this next couple series of slides, and it might kind of indicate why there could be a problem. Again, there's going to be wide variance among the programs, but this is just after doing this for 2 years of actual programming for PreVeteran, and then actually the 5 years prior to that was put into the research and the programming. This is kind of what we found. It kind of seems obvious when you kind of step back from where everyone's at in the transition. So the way PreVeteran views the transition space is the military ecosystem, we call it, and the private sector are vastly different entities. And on the left side, if we start there, you're talking about the military member, very intelligent, very capable, very trained. There's no doubt about that. And then you go to the other side and there's the private sector. And the claim we're making is there is a massive gap between the two. Now the gap is significant, and it's kind of interesting how it's characterized in the transition space. Why is it important? Because the next thing down you could see in the middle, there's 160,000 people plus or minus per year. If you add in the fact that 50% are married statistically, we're well into the 200,000s, where it's impacting not just the individual and their family or in the spouse, but also the family. The claim we're making, because the gap is so wide, that individual service members are not plug and play. There's a couple different reasons for that. When I say plug and play, what I'm talking about is taking them as is, where is from the military ecosystem, and then putting them into a private sector role via SkillBridge or direct employment is challenging. I told you about my success story that I did with an aerospace defense company, but I could tell you the struggle was real getting up to speed. And that's why I'll kind of cover those 3 red barred areas at the bottom. because we're not plug and play, you could see it kicks off the stats. We'll call it symptoms of this claim we're making, that you've all seen it from the 2014 study of 50% leave within 12 months, 65 to 70% leave within 2 years. Just for comparison's sake, that is 4 times faster than non-veteran employees, right? So again, we're not saying one thing or the other. We're just saying that appears to be a symptom of what we just claimed at the top, where there's a huge difference in gaps between the systems. So it should be not surprising, perhaps, that there's such a poor retention problem. Another one we've asked for people that haven't been through our program is that they tell us, just like I told you in my own experience, it takes 9 to 18 months to get up to speed. Now, this is going to be heavily dependent on the role, complexity, and whatnot. But what they typically tell you is that it took me quite a while to get up to speed because I didn't understand that there was a gap. No one was telling me there was a gap and a huge difference in the systems. So the other thing that when you kind of talk to the same folks, and something I experienced myself, and maybe somebody on here could comment perhaps if they want to let us know, you also, as a military member, don't want to tell your boss you're not very comfortable in that role, and you don't want to look like you're, not doing the best you can, right? So you might not be forthright, which exacerbates the getting up to speed problem, right? And that also kind of points to the one on the right where it says doesn't fully understand the role, right? Because military ecosystem generalists, private sector, medium to large size companies, hyper niched role where it's very siloed out what you do, because in the aggregate, those individual roles are taken to address the business needs.
Absolutely. And again, like going back to the beginning of this and what we're showing with this graphic is that you have two fundamentally very different environments. So it makes sense that they're going to have some gaps and misalignments, and it's not to disparage the individual. It's simply a matter of fact that they are going from one environment to a very different environment, and that they have to do some transformation in order to be highly effective in that new environment.
And Joel, thanks for the question. Any comparison data for vets or civilians? The answer is no. This was actual interviews we've done with folks who are in industry who didn't go through our training. But once we kind of went through the slide deck with them and they said, yeah, I was kind of subject to that, and it took me significantly longer to get up to speed. So we do not have that data, but would love to have it. So let's go a layer deeper, because details to us matter. And again, we'd love to hear your perspective on it. This isn't us saying this is how it is. We're just saying this is what our data has kind of shown. So how did we get to these two different entities with these big gaps that we're claiming? How did we get there? And what we think is the core of the problem is what we call the military transition 1.0 model. So again, to walk you through the slide, that bar across the top is military service. You got the little bit of magenta sliver there, which symbolizes the last 12 months of service. And then you can kind of see below that is a more detailed view. And when we say the TAP program, right, we are not here to bash TAP, right? It is a unique organization in the fact that we just talked about 150 to 160,000 people leaving per year. There is no other organization on the planet that has to deal with that type of volume. So we don't object to them having to struggle. What we do object to is no one tells the service member what happens when you take TAP. And essentially what happens is you go through your week-long kind of exercise of having different folks come in and brief you. But what they don't tell you is that your workload triples, right? So let me walk you through this. The 1X is doing everything you normally were doing before you went to TAP and before you started your transition: training, deployment, family obligations. The 2X, the additional stuff you have to do is actually disentangle from the military. A lot of briefings, a lot of out processing. You got to do your VA claim. You got to start worrying about insurance needs, finances. And you can see that 12-month window gets tiny, gets really, really, really tight. At least you know what the 1 and 2X things are, though, and you have to do them before you get out of the military, which then sets up this 3X, right? The 3X is the most unfamiliar, and it's the most different than your experience in the military, where you have to re-individualize. You have to regain your autonomy. But how does one do that? Who am I? What do I want to do? Find a mentor, build a network, do resumes, and all these things. So you can see the natural behaviors are, I'm really good at 1 and 2. I'll focus on that. 3 is an outlier because I would argue while TAP has some strengths, refinding and connecting to who you are as an individual is not one of them, right? That's a very hard proposition to be able to do that because you need to leave the military where you were a group and then return to being an individual, which is why if you follow this slide over to the right, what we end up seeing, and it's actually in the research vernacular as extended transition, is you will flow into another organization, in this case, a SkillBridge or direct employment. And they're really that new career prep, who am I, what am I going to do, is still unresolved. So we see this as one of the biggest nexus that it creates challenges for both the individual who wants to do well, but hasn't been given the tools to regain their individuality. And then the corporate entity that does want to leverage the veteran talent, but is not aware that the individual is not quite transformed enough in order to really understand how to thrive in that role.
And by the way, I mean, this is for everyone going through this process, right? That you don't get the brief on the fact that in your last 12 months, you'll be doing all these activities. And it becomes very overwhelming if you do put things off into that window of time. So it's understandable that you're in an overwhelmed position and you're having a hard time navigating that even further because of the stress put on you during that small time frame. And this cuts right to Courtney's comment. I think that she's saying, hey, we're having issues with looking at potential mentorship opportunities, that we need more mentorship for these folks going into SkillBridge, that we need to have clear discussions on compensation going into SkillBridge, and then maybe offer different kind of training in order to get that low conversion rate into a higher conversion rate to make the program more effective. So I think what we're describing here is exactly showcased by Courtney's comment.
Yeah. And Courtney, let me kind of like show you maybe a few more insights. So if this is the model, and again, this is the PreVeteran thesis for what's creating the downstream challenges, you can kind of go to the next thing here. So what does that model mean for the individual that's flowing into your SkillBridge or perhaps direct employment channels? Well, start on the left side. They come out confused going, who am I? What do I want to do? What career do I want to be in? Here's the confusion. They're probably doing some things that are missing the mark, potentially some unproductive activities. And then from an individual standpoint, they might be taking on risk, right? Because even if they are flowing into your SkillBridge internship and it's all set up, there is a chance they're not going to get a full-time role. So guess what? They're going to be back in the frying pan, having to do this again, except then potentially if they're separating, they don't have a retirement income, and you can kind of see if they didn't save well. It just creates a lot of stress that is potentially, or as we would say, completely unnecessary if the individual training component was actually part of this earlier. So what does this mean for employers, right? So we kind of arguably, we said it's a bit of a lose for the individual, right? Because they're not prepared properly. It's also a miss for the employers. So here, that same individual, not sure who they are, what they want to do, industry or company, flow into a SkillBridge or direct employment, there's a strong propensity for a talent mismatch, which is all over the data, that 50% and 65%. That was a landmark study in 2014, but if you go back to the data 30 years old, it shows the exact same phenomenon. And then longer onboarding process, again, through interviews we've done. And then as HR professionals, the additional costs are significant, ranging from 100 to 300% of the salary, depending on how long they've been there and how to replace them. Again, these numbers based on Gallup and Center for American Progress and Society of Human Resource Management. Okay, so let me pause right there for a minute. What do you think of our analysis? Accurate, not accurate? Are we missing something? Again, we'd love to get your contribution in this because we want to make sure we're hitting the mark, and we want to make sure we're giving you information that becomes actionable to get you thinking a little differently to how to make your SkillBridge way more effective. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And Dave's kind of jumping the gun here. He's saying, hey, something to contextualize SkillBridge before you take it would be great, right? Yes. Yes, it would, Dave, and we're gonna talk about that.
Courtney, thank you so much. This aligns well with the takeaways from our one-on-one conversations. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over the next slide. So Aaron, actually, again, this is just for discussion. We're not drawing any conclusions here, but Aaron, he'll tell you about the FOIA request he did with the SkillBridge folks.
Yeah, so back in March, I requested some Freedom of Information Act data from DoD, and it eventually found its way to the individual branches which are tracking some of this data. And just a few of the trends that I noticed when they sent this to me. So I have 2021. It's not pictured, but I also got the 2022 data. And then 2023, obviously, we're not closed out, but this is where they are currently at. Now, a few trends that I noticed that I think are interesting, and I would love to get comments or thoughts on this, but when we're looking at how many folks did not report a job offer, it was about 50-50 a couple of years ago. In 2022, much higher, and then in 2023, we're at 87% not reporting one way or the other if they got the job. And then in terms of how many people have gotten a job and accepted it out of SkillBridge, again, we're looking at 49% in 21, and then we're at 10% right now for 23. So if you notice, there's an increase in the amount of people that simply aren't reporting, and then a decrease in the number of people that are reporting getting actual job offers. We also know the program has grown exponentially in the last couple of years and is continuing to grow. It's becoming more and more something that DoD is looking towards as a potential solution for some of the struggles. And I believe it's even getting funding starting next year from Congress. So there'll be an actual SkillBridge staff that will be overseeing this program. To Steve's point, I think earlier, it's better to track this stuff internally because the military, I don't know what your thoughts are on this data, but to me, this was an insight into the fact that the program is growing rapidly and we're not necessarily getting the oversight on the program that we need because we're not following up with these individuals to see if they're even getting a job or not. We simply don't have the data. I mean, 87%, we have no idea for this year. And that's a trend that's getting worse in essence. So eventually, once this program is stood up and funded, which will be next year, there will be a lot more oversight and formality to the program. And I think there's also going to be a lot more asking questions of employers, especially if they're having struggles with their conversion rates, figuring out, hey, why aren't you actually getting more folks aligned and on board with your company that are going into your SkillBridge program? So part of this is it's going to become a proposition to reduce risk in the future for some of these companies once we do get a handle on this program. But I'd be interested in insights folks gather from this data that I just received.
So like Aaron was saying here, we're not drawing any conclusions, it's just data. It is interesting how it's ticked up significantly for did not report. So maybe there's not a system in place. Maybe there's not a lot of offers. We just don't know. But we'd love to kind of get your thoughts. There's been a lot of good comments saying, you know what, let's be honest about it, right? Maybe it's not working for our organization that great. Maybe we could do something better. Again, we're not here to poke at anybody. We're here to go, let's see what the actual truth is with the organizations. Let's see what's going on here and join this conversation, because I know you guys have all seen this on LinkedIn before, but I mean, it's kind of universally accepted as a complete win for everybody that SkillBridge has been created. We would love to believe that, but we need to know if it's true. And that's why we're having these conversations, and we're going to have them more often. I am going to show next. We are going to share some information on what we've learned in the last 2 years of running our individual programs. You've seen our thesis, military transition 1.0 system, not setting up the individual for success, meaning the individual is not told they need to transform. So they don't. And what happens is they get at the end of their 12 months, They haven't figured out who I am, what I want to do, what industry, company, role, level I want to go into, which is the level of specificity you need to know in order to be successful, in our opinion, in the private sector, because that's what the private sector is seeking. So after running this for 2 years, what we call our employment prep course, these are the 3 big employment related gaps that your non-trained military members coming out of the military and going into your SkillBridge or direct employment channels will be lacking. It is a communication gap, mindset decision-making gap, and then private sector alignment gap. I'll hum a few bars on each here. So communication gap, we're not just talking about LinkedIn and networking. We're talking about actually having integrated technologies put together so you can come across to a subject matter expert in the industry professionally, efficiently, and know what you're talking about so you can ask them questions. So there's an actual technology linkage that there needs to be a level of competency. We just did our post-course interviews, and I'll share what someone had said to us after the during the post-course interview. He told us, I had used these technologies, but I had never used them to get a job. So it's kind of the more use case for technologies and being able to integrate things in an effective way in order to reach out to that subject matter expert, that competency is not there right now. The next is the mindset decision-making gap. So when you're a military member and you've spent a lot of time in the military environment we talked about, remember the 2 environments, it actually does condition the way you think. And we are at our core a cognitive neuroscience-based company, which is a very fancy way of saying we really believe that the thoughts in your mind lead to behaviors, lead to actions, and then lead to outcomes. So that linkage really puts the onus on you to make sure you understand how you're thinking and make sure whether or not that thinking and those actions are productive or counterproductive to your success post-military. So that's one of our definite competencies. And what we're finding out is that the military member approaches the transition from, let's say, an unknowns and assumptions standpoint. Lots of unknowns, which then their brain will be a hive of activity trying to figure things out. My spouse told me this all the time when I was going through my transition myself without the tools. And then the other side is the assumptions. So the assumption piece is your brain will tell you in declarative messages things about the private sector that you haven't experienced, but you're going to feel like you're a authority on. So what ends up happening is between those 2 parts of how your decision making is done within your brain, that's going to lead you down conclusions that we would say are not productive to your success post-military. But what's great about that, not those behaviors, but once you make the service member that goes through our program aware of those behaviors and why they're happening, they disarm that mindset very quickly. They start interrogating their own cognition, how they think, and then they begin changing the way they think, and they become a lot more open to learning about how the private sector actually functions, the roles that aid the profit-making enterprise, how companies make money, how they could fit into that apparatus rather than fighting it from an assumption standpoint. And then finally, that leads into the private sector alignment gap. So these things have to be done in this order. That's what we also found out in the last 2 years, because if you don't attack the mindset decision-making gap, or rather have them attack their own mindset decision-making gap and change the way they think, then everything you do downstream from that is good. If you don't do that, then they're going to fight themselves and fight the educator on that as they go through that system. Any questions on that? This is like probably the funnest part of individual transformation that we absolutely love. When you get a service member or military spouse that goes through our program and the light comes on, that is what we do. That is what we love. Giving them back their autonomy is our core capability. And we think that that's going to aid your SkillBridge, the ultimate performance in that future employee or intern and then future full-time employment role. All right.
Yeah, I think what's not talked about enough, right, is that there's a lot of assumptions made for individuals that flow into either full-time roles or SkillBridge, that they do have an alignment with the company or they do have a certain understanding But sometimes that's simply not the case. And so we're here to, offer up the insights we've gotten over a couple of years running over 100 veterans through this course, and to say we know very specifically what's in their brain and what could be getting in their own way to their success at the company. And we think we can bring this to your company to give this veteran specific training in the context of SkillBridge in a way that will really impact outcomes.
Thank you, Aaron, for that. So let me kind of tell you where this kind of came from, the SkillBridge Optimizer course. So this is an offer we have for corporate entities, and it is a standalone course, but it also has training associated with it. So because we've been training folks to leave the military to be successful, and we have lots of testimonials and lots of transformation indicating that, we know if they do not receive this training, we know what those behaviors could be like as they go into SkillBridge and then full-time employment. So this idea actually came from our students. A lot of our students kind of said, hey, I've been through your course. I've successfully transitioned to the private sector industry. I now sit on boards where we're bringing in SkillBridge people, and everything you talk about in your course, we see them. And so now that they have the tools to kind of understand the military member's mindset, they could see it instantly. And that's something we can do for you as a SkillBridge program manager, as your HR staff, DEI staff, different managers, different leaders within your organization. We can train you what those were, just like we did with our graduates who are now sitting on these boards. So aligning with those three gaps: communication, decision-making, and thinking, and then alignment to the private sector, this course that we have provides all those things. And then also obviously support, because naturally as your students or your SkillBridge folks go through the program, there's going to be questions we need to support them on that ultimately make them a better prospect for full-time employment roles. Here's how this works, just so you know. So after interviewing lots and lots and lots of SkillBridge folks, so here is typically how we've seen. And by the way, this isn't limited to SkillBridge. If you have your own internship program, it's very easy to modify this for your own individual internship program if you don't do SkillBridge. But typically there's a SkillBridge offer extended via email. Hey, we'd like to accept you into the program. The individual says yes. Right after that, there's typically this window here before the start date of a couple weeks. It's very easy for us to embed our course in there. The course is hosted on our platform, so it'd be as easy as getting emails and names, enroll them into the course. At the end of that, you can kind of see the performance here in those three measures. We have automated now. We give each a report card, and then you and your staff we can prove the efficacy of the program for you. You can do interviews with those folks after the program to hear about the different transformation and efficacy in there. And then obviously they go into the SkillBridge start and then the subsequent onboarding or mini onboarding for SkillBridge with a heck of a lot more context to be able to understand why the company is organized that way, what they do, how I could fit in, what roles I might want to pursue. It just is a bunch of context covered over a very short period of time that really aids both the individual and the organization to make the program how it is now better is really our intent that we're trying to do there. I'll pause right there for a sec. Is there any questions on comment or otherwise?
So just as kind of an overarching overview, I mean, we covered a lot of stuff because it was quite a journey to get from, where we're starting out to here. But going through this military transition is a very complex process, and you're going from one environment to one very different environment that requires a level of transformation and a new set of tools, a new training so that you can understand and contextualize that new environment. Because we've been doing this for 2 years and running over 100 veterans through this program, we know what they're thinking and what their gaps and misalignments are. So we're able to take that program that we developed and really basically distill it down into these 3 modules, which are standalone. The course can be done global, anywhere in the world, on demand, through our platform. and we find it's, extremely user friendly, but it gives a lot of insights for both the employer and the individual in order to optimize the SkillBridge opportunity so that that time isn't wasted, so that they actually hit the ground running when they get there and they know what they're getting into. And by the way, it can be individualized. We have these 3 modules as the core of our program. But if your company has particular requirements or particular items that you would like your SkillBridge participants to go through, we can offer that as an add-on to what we're bringing to the table here. So very affordable and easy to use option to do veteran specific training at your organization for those SkillBridge folks who are flowing in. And I think that really makes people stand out too, because as we know, the number of companies in the SkillBridge ecosystem has exploded. I think last I checked, there was over 6,000 organizations. Is that right, Jason?
Yep.
And last I checked, there were around 20,000 or so SkillBridge participants annually. So if you just do the simple math, the ratio isn't awesome. And there's a lot of companies competing for not that many service members. So in a competitive environment like that, to me, this provides an opportunity that you can stand out. You can deliver the highest quality veteran-specific training that's out there based off a lot of insight and knowledge on what's going on with the individual in a way that's data-driven and provides actual feedback at the end on where they were starting out and where they go by the end of the program. So I'd be really interested in what folks think of this offering.
And while they're kind of mulling that over, the other thing we do, and I learned about being in industry 9 years in a variety of roles, something has to work. So what we want to do with companies is begin developing a relationship. We want to run a pilot with a limited number of folks, and we want to prove that it works. And with that relationship, there's a bunch of other things we can do, but we see this as really the first step. Again, we're kind of the first ones in this space where there's actual veteran specific training specifically for SkillBridge based on known principles we know have worked, because we've been doing this for 2 years to understand the actual gaps and misalignments individuals have leaving the military. So we'd love to have the opportunity to talk with your company, see if this fits into your profile. Again, niche in and grow. That's what we're trying to do. So this is our final slide here. And you can see, you can reach out to me and Aaron or both of us and have a chat. You can see we're also active on LinkedIn. Feel free to do a direct message, instant message, and we would be happy to set up a call with you to go into more detail. We're very excited about what could be done in this space. Again, we know that SkillBridge represents a great opportunity for both parties. It's just potentially under optimized right now, and we think we can help you do that.
Absolutely. And we're already getting some major buy-in. And I mean, we'd love to talk to Courtney and start addressing some of her needs and really hear from the employer. What are your pain points with this program, or how can we even expand it maybe and get more folks into your SkillBridge pipeline? Because I think we can kind of serve all those needs. And it's a fantastic opportunity. This kind of training is going to help the individual in such a profound way as well. Because we know once we get their mindset aligned with life outside of the military, we just know that makes for such a smoother transition in ways that go well beyond employment. So it's something we're happy to bring to the market now, and we're excited to grow this and see what people think. So let us know what you think. I think that's all we got today. Unless anyone has comments for us, questions, we're kind of leaving this up for the Q&A. So we'll hang on here for the next couple of minutes here and see if any questions pop up on what we've talked about so far. So feel free to comment, put your own SkillBridge experience if you did SkillBridge in the comments. And I'll be really interested to see where things go in the next year or two as that program and that office is stood up and they do get funding. And that 87% that's right now a shoulder shrug of we don't know if they're getting jobs or not. I think that's going to change once they have a staff and they have some more formality to the program. And I think the program also is going to grow. It's going to keep growing. So thanks for joining us today, and thanks for being on this live. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to Jason or I. We'd love to hop on a call with you and discuss your organization's needs or how we can help your SkillBridge program. That's all we got today. Jason, you got any last words of wisdom?
That's it. I love speaking with everybody and just kind of getting the conversation going. These are important conversations. So thanks again for taking the time.
All right. See you guys.
See ya.